You're the one that you've been looking for. And I'm just here to remind you of that. I've created this channel to learn things and then to share them with you. Some things about the ego that you may have gotten wrong. One, it's not a bad thing. Two, yes, when you attach to it, it can go down some pretty fucking dark routes. But the actual goal, the actual purpose of your ego is just this. It's a lens. It gives you your place in time and space. No more, no less. That's it. Your consciousness is not your ego, right? Again, your ego is your lens. Think in terms of the all is an infinite being, right? It creates in its mind. The last video I made, you can check that out on What is Reality. So this is going to be a little crude example, right? But say this is the all, but imagine this was infinite and it was everywhere. And here's the veil, right? Crossing the veil to oneness. Well, the all sort of squeezes itself out into little points, right? Each one of those little points is a thing that exists in the material world in all the different dimensions. Say this little dot is you. This dot is your body. This dot is a molecule. This dot is your dad, right? All these things are sort of individualized allness. But the thing that gave them their individualization is the ego. The reason why the ego can get so dark sometimes is because people attach themselves with that ego, and the ego is separation. And separation, at least in humans, is a bad thing. I mean, you look at the Bible. Before the Tower of Babel was built, humanity was one race with one language. And the gods said, look at man. When he is one people with one language, he can accomplish anything he sets his mind to. He can be like the gods. And so what he did was he destroyed the Tower of Babel and scattered humanity across the earth and confounded us so we couldn't understand one another's speech. Differences can be weak. Without differences, we lose out in cultures. Foods from around the world, spices from around the world, all your favorite things from around the world, and they can be so different from one another. That is on part because of the ego. But separations can get dark, and we know how much separation, for example, increases depression. The more isolated someone feels, the more likely they are to be depressed. Community and bonding, these are things that lift the spirits up. So the ego is a double-edged sword. Some call it the fall of man. Some call it, if you're speaking strictly in symbolic terms, the ego is Satan, is Lucifer. And the reason why is because Lucifer represents the fall from heaven, the fall from God to the material world. That gives the ego automatically a negative outlook because the devil is all about the material. It's just a separation from God. That's what it is. But imagine if you weren't ever able to experience the laughter of your own newborn child. These experiences we have because of the ego. There's an infinite amount of lenses in the universe, an infinite amount of souls that can be created, an infinite amount of everything that can happen ever. And we only experience that because of the ego. Not only, but that is our way of experiencing that. It's because of the ego. Just don't attach to it. Realize that you are not it. Realize that it's the goal of the ego to see individualization, because that, maybe not that it's the goal, but it's just inherently what happens. I mean, it's the role of the ego to give you separation, so it only makes sense that because of it, you would see other separation. You would see differences in people. You would see I would see how I am me, Keith. I have dreadlocks. I play music. I have a YouTube channel. I write books. I fucking burn incense. I go for walks and like to sit in the sauna. These things are what define me. That definition makes me my own individual entity. But it'll dissolve eventually. Keith will dissolve. The ego the lens will dissolve and I'll be returned back to wherever it is that I came from, God, heaven, whatever you want to call it, or be recycled here into another dimension, the 5th dimension, the 6th dimension, go down to the 2nd, 1st dimension. I don't know. But that's the ego. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I have a book called 7 Pillars by Keith Garcia. Leave a comment, help me out. I have an Etsy shop, a bunch of cool gadgets. I make my own candles, distill my own essential oils, make my own fucking magic and shit. Would love the support. So I always have a Patreon. I'll put a link on that. If you guys want to help out Patreon, that would be dope. But if not, just being here is good enough. Appreciate it. That being said, I will talk to you guys in the next video. Thanks. Peace out.